morning friends, I welcome you all to another edition of Daily News Analysis. So, in this particular edition we are going to take a look at very important articles that are part of Hindu as well as Indian Express newspapers. Particularly, obviously our discussion have moved towards covering more of a prelim subjects nowadays, so that you can have the comprehensive coverage of current affairs from the perspective of say prelims for CSE 2026. See, most of the time the current affairs part in UPSC prelims is little bit challenging to cover. Okay. So, but as far as the recent analysis goes of the current affairs, you have to focus on doing the current affairs from limited sources as well. So, do not over expand it, always focus on the static revision, cover the static revision well. See, the paper is still static. Apart from that, PYQ analysis is something very important from the perspective of prelims success as well. So, PYQ analysis is very vital, but again the paper is becoming dynamic because of the dynamic nature of the question. So, essentially what do I mean by the dynamic nature of the question in prelims is, see, there are purely say prelims, in prelims particularly there will be purely current affairs questions, and then there will be questions in which there is static plus current affairs mix, and then there is purely static. So, this middle portion of static plus current affairs is also very substantial, and that creates lot of problems. See, when it comes to say overall paper, the paper is uncertain and unpredictable per se. There is pattern difficulty, understanding the question pattern well and not getting surprised in the actual exam is very vital here. Not per se ki question difficult aa rahe hain, that is, I do not feel that is the question here, but sometimes understanding the pattern well and actually maneuvering accordingly becomes a challenge. So, let us get into the daily news analysis part today. Particularly in this edition we are going to take a look at 7 articles from the perspective of prelims particularly. So, the first article is about obviously the inclusion of Deepawali into the World Heritage Site, particularly the intangible cultural heritage list that is recently released. So, Deepawali being the our favorite festival itself is it is a proud moment for all of us, because this part of our culture, this part of our tradition has been included as a part of intangible cultural heritage of humanity by the UNESCO. So, very important update from the perspective of prelims also. Many times UPSC has asked questions in this regard, like in 2023 itself they have asked what is the latest entry in the UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage list. So, very important update. Another important article that we are going to take a look at is about CIC selection process. In the recent sort of meeting in the of the CIC panel, we have the leader of opposition actually objecting or noting his dissent that the selection process is not favoring say minorities or say less representative units of the society. So, important update again. Third important article is about Australia's teen social media ban kicking in. So, very historic sort of world's first teen social media ban is there now operational in Australia. Whether what sort of learning the world can take, or whether this will create the new renewed momentum for say banning the social media from teenagers say life is something very interesting and important. See, most of the time the teenage mental health issue is very vital, particularly not just in Western societies, but in emerging economies and emerging societies also. So, to address this particular issue, although banning itself sometimes will create an alternative sort of ecosystem in which the unregulated apps may thrive. To certain extent there are issues surrounding say freedom of speech and expression also, but it is definitely a world's first. Another important article is about Sudanese civil war, a humanitarian crisis unfolding. Particularly Sudanese war is there since last 2-3 years particularly. See, this particular region of Africa is suffering not just from say not just from climate crisis, like droughts are very much prevalent. Apart from that, humanitarian crisis because of say the greed of the generals also. So there was a military coup in 2021 in Sudan. After that, we have these two generals from two separate sort of forces of Sudan, which are part of that particular coup, fighting between themselves for the obviously the power in Sudan now. So to certain extent that has created a humanitarian crisis. So there is a hunger crisis, and then there are humanitarian crisis perpetrated due to this particular civil war. So very important satellite science and spectrum fight, particularly important from the perspective of say Starlink related updates. See, this particular article gives you the idea about how International Telecommunication Union works, or rather why spectrum fight is going to be a defining fight going forward. What exactly are the developments in this regard when it comes to global spectrum or the fight towards monopoly in this particular internet satellite sector. So important analysis again. Another important article is about Western Tragopan. So this is very new species that was in news. This is the state bird of Himachal Pradesh, the peafowl. It looks like sort of peacock, but it is different species of peafowl itself. Very important species in news, the bird species. So we are going to take a look at what exactly is the issue with this particular bird, why the numbers have declined in recent times, and whether the captive breeding is a success or not. So to certain extent, important analysis from the perspective of environment. Another important article is about marine protected areas. See, in recent times we have offshore blocks being opened up by the government for mining purposes, and there is a protest by the particularly the protests were more fierce in the state of Kerala. So from the perspective of say overall protection of the ecologically sensitive marine areas, and marine biodiversity, this particular news sent alarm bells ringing overall for the protection of marine biodiversity. But now what the government has said, that they are not going to open up offshore blocks in the marine protected areas. So this is sort of means way around to ensure the sustainable development in such a way that we are actually not depriving the coastal communities from the economic benefit of the resources that are there, at the same time conserving the environment in such a way that the marine biodiversity is also getting protected in the process. So to certain extent, we are going to see what sort of response the people of these coastal communities will have to this particular announcement of the government. So these are some of the important articles that we are going to take a look at. So the first important article is about inclusion of Deepawali into the intangible cultural heritage list. So very important sort of update. You can clearly see the PYQ here. So very important from the perspective of GS1 art and culture part. So in the latest update, our Prime Minister also said that this is an historic opportunity for the promotion of our own soft power at the global level. This is actually very popular festival outside also. So see, the inclusion of Deepawali is a historic milestone for India's overall representation of art and culture in UNESCO's World Heritage listings, particularly a year after Parsi New Year. Parsi New Year was included last year. Nowruz was added to the UNESCO's representative list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Now we have the inclusion of Deepawali, the festival of light, being included in the UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage list. Durga Puja and Garba have already made it to the list earlier. Now the decision was taken during the key meeting of UNESCO being held at the Red Fort. So this particular meeting is happening for the first time in India. So this is the historic meeting in which India is promoting its own culture in such a way that it will actually boost our tourism as well, tourism to certain extent, and apart from that it will actually boost our soft power also. So it is a diplomatic tool to certain extent, although the the powers like United States are ignoring the overall UN structure, UNESCO itself, but to certain extent India is doubling down on the support to UN agencies. So, this is our commitment towards upholding world order as well. India had sent the Deepawali nomination dossier in 2023 itself for 24-25 cycle. So, in particularly next year cycle we have sent the nomination for Bihar Chhat Puja. So, we will see next year at this time the inclusion of Bihar Chhat Puja in the UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage list as well. So, very important update here. So, just go through this particular article, very vital. So, you can see the Prime Minister's quote. What he says is, for us Deepawali is very closely linked to our culture and ethos. Very true. It is the soul of our civilization. That's what he says. He uses these words very carefully. The addition of Deepawali to the UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage list will contribute to the festival's global popularity even further. So, it will definitely increase the global popularity of Deepawali further. So, that's the case. It will act as a cultural boost. It will give cultural boost to India's tourism to certain extent. So, what happened is in UNESCO's 20th ICH committee session that is hosted for the first time in India. So, this particular 20th session of Intergovernmental Committee for the, what is the short form, long form here of ICH, Intergovernmental Committee for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage. So, of humanity to certain extent is being held at the Red Fort. As I said, over 1000 delegates from 180 countries are being participating in this particular in this particular 20th session. So, India's nomination of Deepawali for UNESCO's ICH list, particularly officials highlighted that the nomination process for Deepawali drew extensive diverse communities, groups and individuals. So, Deepawali's nominations has very extensive support from the diverse communities. So, that sort of when you have that sort of support for any particular event or any particular cultural phenomena, the meeting has to take a note. The Sangeet Natak Academy, see, this is also very important from the perspective of Prelims. Sangeet Natak Academy act as the nodal agency, constituted a national committee of experts, academicians, practitioners, poets and writers, ensuring regional representation to reflect festivities pan-Indian character. So, to certain extent Sangeet Natak Academy is the nodal agency. So, remember this particular fact from the perspective of UPSC prelims. So, very important. This particular fact you may be asked in prelims directly. The nomination also target recognition of Deepawali's significance within the global Indian diaspora as well. So, that is true. So, it shows the power of diaspora to certain extent as well. So, India's cultural and current ICH inscriptions is something also very important. There are 15 currently, and Deepawali is the 16th one. So, each and every intangible cultural heritage listing is important. Just let me just remind you of these all 15 listings particularly here. So, the first and foremost is Kutiyattam, that is Sanskrit theatre tradition of Kerala. Then we have Ram Leela, very famous Ram Leela traditional performance of Ramayana. Then there is a Raman, this is essentially religious festival and rituals theatre in Uttarakhand. Raman is very famous in Uttarakhand particularly. Mudiyattu is there, ritual dance drama of Kerala. Kalbeliya, the folk song and dances of Rajasthan, that is also part of intangible cultural heritage list. See, Chhau dance, semi-classical martial dance of eastern India, particularly Assam. It is very famous, the Chhau dance particularly. Buddhist chanting of Ladakh, monastic recitation tradition, Sankirtan ritual singing, drumming and dancing of Manipur, traditional brass and copper craft of Teteras in Punjab particularly. So, this is also intangible cultural heritage in cultural heritage list. Yoga is also included. Then you have Navroz last year, Kumbh Mela as well. So, these are some of the entries that are there from India. Very important to know each and every entry. So, just remember these entries, very vital from the perspective of prelims. So apart from that, we have Durga Puja as well. So see, I forgot about these names as well. So Durga Puja in Kolkata, Garba dance of Gujarat, Vedic chanting tradition, that is oral tradition of oral recitation of Vedas is also included. So what exactly, how the committee work, by the way, the to be declared any site or any tradition as intangible cultural heritage of humanity, the list must be inclusive, representative and community based. See, it should not be very sort of seclusive, particularly it should be inclusive and representative of the community. As I earlier said, Deepawali has the diverse communities supporting its inclusion. So that worked in its favor. These elements reflect the skills, traditions and social practices of communities. So examples, for example, baguette bread. So baguette bread is there. France baguette bread was included as an ICH element. UNESCO chief Aubrey Azoulay noted it celebrates the French way of life. Emphasis is on preserving such skills and social habits for the future. So this is also one of the foremost goal of declaring any sort of heritage or any sort of part of culture which is very important for day to day life of people. See, Deepawali is our culture soul. So it reflects the light, the hope that is there. So the light itself shows the importance of, say, coming out of ignorance. So to certain extent, it is the message given by Deepawali is also resonate with very large number of people. So to certain extent, it is the rightful candidate for representing India's India's own cultural motto of unity in diversity, particularly urgency of conservation, globalization and conflicts threaten diverse social histories. So UNESCO maintains special section for elements at risk as well. So essentially, preservation is something is also important element here of ICH declaring any cultural heritage or say system as part of intangible cultural heritage. So essentially, you can see some of the other examples from different countries. Like in Vietnam, we have art of pottery making of Cham people. In Chile, we have Santa Cruz de Cuca pottery. Albania में भी एक है handcrafted garment of Shubleta particularly, and we have in Turkey particularly traditional ahlat stonework. So these are some important sort of traditions which have been there in ICH. So particularly you can see the composition here. It consists of 24 states and not that much important. The most important part here is it implements the state parties to the 2003 convention. So essentially, what exactly is this 2003 convention is also important here. So this is the convention which actually means it is there for the preservation of this intangible cultural heritage site that was signed way back in 2003, the convention, and ICH tries to implement that particular convention for the preservation of these 2003 convention. You can clearly see here the 2003 convention by state parties. So the implementation becomes very important. The representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity, the list of intangible cultural, the register of good safeguarding practices. So these are three important lists that are prepared. Not that much important, just know some of the basics here, that's it. This is particularly very important practice question for you. Just comment your answer in the comment section. Next important article that we are going to take a look at is at CIC selection meet, Rahul flags lack of backward minority names in the short list. So CIC Chief Information Commissioner, particularly CIC is an important authority. It is a statutory authority emanating from the RTI Act, okay, RTI Act of 2005 obviously, and we have the very important sort of amendments in 2019 to this particular RTI Act also. So they said that there is very famous criticism of those amendments that these these amendments in 2019 weakened the overall RTI. So to certain extent, now the leader of opposition has noted his dissent in the selection panel meeting. So, we are going to see the name of the person, the next CIC in the upcoming times, if the name has been finalized. So, from the perspective of say prelims, you must know what exactly is this CIC. So, but before that, let us look at the latest update here. So, what has happened is the post of CIC is vacant since long. So, you can clearly see the post being vacant since September 13. The post of Chief Information Commissioner CIC has been vacant since September 13 following the retirement of Hirala Samaria, a Dalit, upon attaining the age of 65. So, obviously, this is the upper age limit. Additionally, 8 information commissioners posts have been lying vacant for several years as well, of the maximum 10 IC positions. So, particularly the information commission need to have 11 members. Out of these, 10 are information commissioners and one obviously is chief information commissioner. So, what has happened is there are repeated government opposition opposition disagreements with the government's position in the meeting. See, the most important thing from the perspective of prelims to understand is what exactly is the composition of the panel that selects CIC. So, we are going to take a look at this particular aspect directly here. I am not going to go too much detail into the CIC and all those all the working and how and what are the 2019 amendment in this regard, because of the lack of paucity of time, particularly the paucity of time in this regard. So, essentially let us get into the composition of the panel that selects CIC here. So, for the selection of CIC, we have first and foremost 3-member panel. You have Prime Minister. See, obviously, President in finally will choose the will actually select or elect or not elect, will select the CIC. So, President is the final authority CIC, but obviously he has to act on aid and advice of the Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister. But before that, we have the committee which selects, which sends the name to the President, and he essentially in a way has to sign on to that particular name. So, this particular selection panel have PM plus any cabinet minister nominated by the Prime Minister. So, cabinet minister plus leader of opposition in Lok Sabha. So, this is 3-member panel to select CIC. Okay. So, select CIC and ICs. So, what happens is most of the time the selection goes through majority. So, obviously, the Prime Minister, the government gets the majority in the panel meeting itself, and they can elect their own person to or own name through this particular system to the post of say CIC. So, and that is what creates tension between ruling party and opposition. Most of the time there are dissents that are being recorded by the opposition, leader of opposition in these meetings as well. So, let us look at some basics of CIC. You can clearly see the legal framework is obviously the RTI Act. The RTI Act governs it, and actually RTI Act की वजह से ही we have these CICs and ICs. So, Constitution, the Central Information Commission is a statutory body obviously under the RTI Act. 1 Chief Information Commissioners up to 10 Information Commissioner. Appointment process you can clearly see appointing authority is obviously President, and we have Selection Committee, Prime Minister, LOP and Union Cabinet Minister nominated by the Prime Minister. So, this particular part is very important. See, most of the time you may get a question in prelims directly on the appointment process about the selection panel, particularly on CIC and ICs. You have state information commissioners as well, similar composition and similar sort of similar procedure is there for the selection of CIC and ICs at the state level. Then we have CVC as well, Chief Vigilance Commissioner also. Then we have CBI Director to certain extent. Apart from that, Lokpal, Lokayuktas, and then we have other important functionaries as well. So, to certain extent the selection panel is important of all these constitutional, non-constitutional statutory authorities. So, you can clearly see some of the important amendments that are being made to the CIC Act, although this particular chart here or this particular slide here actually mentions the most important parts of the CIC. For example, you can see clearly the powers and functions, of CIC. So, essentially section 18 and 19 of RTI Act mentions it. Adjudicatory role is there, recommendation and guidance you can clearly see. Then tenure and service is something, this particular part has been changed a lot by 2019 amendment. So, tenure previously 5 years of or until 65 years of age, post 2019 amendment it is determined by the central government now. So, this particular thing has created an issue, particularly from the perspective of say conflict of interest. Salary and allowances prescribed by the central government. So, this also creates conflict of interest. Reappointment allowed unless explicitly barred by the government rules. So, government interference has become a norm in the selection process of CIC, and that is how it has actually influenced the overall working of RTA also, because these are the authorities that will implement the CIC, implement the RTA Act. So, with the recently passed DPDI Act, DPDP Act also, RTA has been weakened further, and with this particular earlier amendment we have the initiation of say weakening of the RTI. So, apart from that, State Information Commission is also important. CIC equivalent at the state level is called State Chief Information Commissioner. State CIC appointment process is very similar. You can see clearly the appointment process. Governor is appointing authority similar to President. Selection committee here is important, like Chief Minister as chair, leader of opposition in assembly, and State Cabinet Minister nominated by CM. So, it is very similar. It is very similar at the state level. So, actually it functions mirror those of the Central Information Commission. So, this particular chart here is very important. Such charts you can prepare for all the constitutional and non-constitutional bodies, so that you can have all the information at one place. So, for example, aspect you can see the statutory basis, CIC and IC we have Right to Information Act particularly, and then for Lokpal and Lokayuktas we have 2013 Act, for CVC we have Central Vigilance Act of 2003, and Election Commissioner we have Constitution of India Article 324 and 320 through to 329. So, Election Commission is obviously a constitutional body. Appointing authority is obviously President. Selection committee, recommendation and selection committee, this is the main part here. So, CIC you can clearly see 3-member committee. For Lokpal and Lokayuktas you have 5 members. So, who are these 5 members for Lokpal and Lokayuktas? Remember, there is Prime Minister as chair, Speaker of Lok Sabha, Leader of Opposition of Lok Sabha, Chief Justice of India, Supreme Court Judge nominated by CGI, and Leader of Opposition in Rajya Sabha. CGI or Supreme Court Judge nominated by CGI. So, these are 5 members for Lokpal and Lokayuktas. CVC के लिए भी same है, similar to CIC. So, CIC and CVC same selection panel. Election commissioners we have 3-member committee, like Prime Minister as chair, Leader of Opposition in Lok Sabha, Chief Justice of India, Supreme Court Judge nominated by CGI. Now, this particular provision is, see, this is actually generated by AI. So, this particular provision is not there now. So, according to the recently passed sort of the act, we have the same sort of situation like CIC and CVC now for ECs. Eligibility criteria you can clearly see as well. When it comes to removal, you can clearly see bipartisan safeguard. I am not going to go too much into the detail of those things. So, such charts you can prepare. So, remember to prepare such charts for all the constitutional and non-constitutional body in comparison sort of charts and format. So, that there will not be any confusion in the prelims. So, you can just look at the question here and comment your answer in the comment section to this particular question. The next important article is about Australia's teen social media ban kicks in. So, very historic sort of development here, particularly from the perspective of children's mental health. See, teenagers suffer from mental health issues a lot. There are many times there are many WHO reports also highlighting the role of social media, and you know, the bubble that that they live in, particularly the Instagram filters and all those things, the beauty standards it promotes. So, to certain extent there are lot many victims of social media over scrutiny and the you know, associated mental health sort of issues. So, from the perspective of say saving children from such, you know, burden, we have this particular act or with this particular law being implemented in Australia. We are going to see whether the Australian, you know, judiciary will strike it down in the upcoming times, but the law is in force in Australia now, and the companies, the social media companies, have to implement this particular law now. So, very important sort of historic world first, actually world first law that has been kicked in Australia, and whether India should follow in the footsteps of this particular law is something will be debated fiercely in upcoming times. Okay. So, let us look at the developments in this regard. See, Australia's new social media ban, social media restriction law, what exactly is it? The Online Safety Amendment Social Media Minimum Age Act bans Australian under 16 from using major social media platforms. So, major social media platforms will be defined under the law. See, platforms must take reasonable steps to identify existing accounts of under 16s, deactivate them, prevent new account creation and block workarounds. Mechanisms must exist to correct errors, and actually under the law they have elected, you know, very dedicated one authority who will implement this law as well. So, to certain extent they have thought of the implementation in such a way that there is no workaround or there is no sort of, you know, no exemptions particularly. So, to certain extent what the rationale behind the law, what the Australian government says, it aims to protect young people from pressure and risk associated with social media use, including cyberbullying. Majority of the time mental health issues arise from cyberbullying, very true, exposure to the harmful content and excessive screen time driven by a platform design itself. So, this particular part here you must have realized, like how much time you spend on reels, looking at the reels and YouTube shorts, you know, sort of most of the time they are addictive. So, what it does to your mental health, to your overall physical health also is something we have to ponder over now. And this particular means, you know, fact actually gets exacerbated when it comes to teenagers. Surveys showed that over half of Australian teens had experienced cyberbullying online. So, cyberbullying is something, you know, is emerging as a major theme here, and to address the online crime and the cyberbullyings of teenagers, this particular law has been kicked in. So, these are the some of the actual you know, rationale given for the law. Platforms covered and exemptions. Platforms affected like Facebook, Insta, Kik, Reddit, Snapchat, Threads, TikTok, Twitch, X, YouTube from December 10, 2025 will be banned for social media users under 16. Excluded dating websites, gaming platforms and AI chatbots, though through AI chatbots remain under scrutiny. So, these dating websites are not included in this, gaming platforms are also not included. I say why they have actually excluded this particular part. Okay. So, maybe there is Gen Z revolt in, maybe there may be a Gen Z or Gen Alpha revolt in Australia if they do this. So, to certain extent to avoid that revolt, they have you know, at least not included gaming platforms and also dating websites. Age restrictions apply to platforms that facilitate online interaction between users, allowing link integrity, posting content, etc. See, what are some implementation challenges and what industry response is in this regard? Industry, obviously the social media big tech reaction is important here. Platforms are required to comply or risk fines up to Australian 33 million dollars. So, big techs, what Meta has said, called the law inefficient, unlikely to make users safer. So if the government's intention to is to make teenagers more safe, this is not so. That's what Meta argues. X has said that it concerned about human rights and freedom of expression. YouTube argued accountless usage removes parental controls and safety filters. So to certain extent, industry response hasn't been positive in this regard. Concerns and human rights considerations are also there. Like Australian Human Rights Commission noted, a blanket ban may curtail free speech and access to information. So this is also something very, very pertinent here. What about, say, freedom of speech and information for teenagers? Okay, does this 16 years of age, 16 years, does it make any difference? Like 16.5 years. So at the age of 16.5 years, you have these rights, but at the age of 15.9 years, you don't have the same rights. And the difference is just of 4 to 5 months. So means, see, this is very, very arbitrary thing, particularly. So it may happen in the upcoming times that the judiciary there may actually overturn this ban. So we are going to see what sort of what happens in this regard, but definitely it seems to be there is some sort of arbitrariness in the actually the implementation of the law. Comparison to India obviously India's comparison in this regard is very pertinent. While India does not have a law specifically to regulate the use of social media platforms by children under the Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023, take companies, and we have rules also. In recent times, we have rules that are being implemented now, which suggest parental control and consent. Parental consent is needed to access the children's data. So beyond it, we don't have anything else. As far as banning the social media on the teenagers' phones, that sort of development is not there, although we have parental consent laws in force. So remember this particular part here. This is very important practice question for you. Just comment your answer in the comment section. So very, very, very pertinent and important example that you should remember from the perspective of mains also. You may get a direct question. See, many times the impact of say social media use on mental health is something is inescapable. So you may get a direct question on it, or you may utilize such examples effectively in your answers, in your essays as well. So another important article is about Sudan's civil war. See, Sudan's civil war is fiercely going on. You can clearly see the humanitarian toll it is taking on the Sudanese people as well. So let's look at some of the basics of root causes of the Sudanese civil war here. So but before that, the Sudan's GDP has already been weakening and saw its steepest contraction in 2023 and 24 by 29%. So it was shrunk by almost 1/3. So this is huge drop. So what it shows is people are getting more poverty stricken in the already poor country like Sudan. So what is the basic reason? Root cause is of the Sudanese civil war. The civil war in Sudan stems from power struggle. So as I earlier said, it is a power struggle between the between the Sudanese armed forces SAF led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and the Rapid Support Forces RSF commanded by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo Hameti. So RSF and SAF are fighting over the territory essentially. Both forces had previously cooperated in the removal of President Omar al-Bashir in 2019 and in 2021 coup also. So that's what earlier they actually collaborated to overthrow the government that was there earlier through military coup, but they are now fighting between themselves for the territory and power. Tensions escalated over plans to integrate RSF into the national army. See what happened is RSF that there was a plan to include RSF directly into the national army of Sudan, but that is opposed by the RSF general Dagalo, and that's why he rebelled. Both generals seeking to retain power, wealth and influence. That's what they are fighting over. Division of control. Sudan is now split into zones. See, places in news from that perspective, this is important. SAF Eastern and Central Sudan, including Port Sudan and Port of Khartoum. RSF most of Darfur and large ports of Kordofan. Large parts of Kordofan. Analysts suggest that RSF's territorial gains allow it to run a parallel administration in the west, while SAF retains central and eastern parts. So, this is very concerning development here, that both these powers, both these military units have actually established their own power centers. So, to certain extent, in the upcoming times there are very less chances of Sudanese war. Even with the Trump's phone call, he will not be able to solve. And but on the other hand, despite almost 50,000 people, more than 50,000 people getting killed in the Sudanese civil war, the world is looking away. So, that is the case, that is the power of social media algorithms and narratives that are being created nowadays. So, most of the time the sort of coverage the Hamas war or the plight of Gaza got from the whole online community, that sort of coverage this particular Sudanese civil war is not getting. Think about it. Why Sudanese civil war is not that much Instagram popular, but everyone is a social media warrior when it comes to Gaza. It is very important to think about the hypocrisy of uber liberals in this regard. So, I am not at all putting any aspersions here, but to certain extent it does is very interesting to think about the plight of Sudanese is not as great as the plight of Gazans. So, this is something very important, and that is what they argue ki we should treat everyone equally, but on the other hand you are not looking at the problem at hand in Sudan. So, very tragic thing that is happening here, but from the perspective of prelims, know these places in news very vital. But obviously, what are the reasons is of the power struggle between the two units of the armed forces. RSF offensive and civilian impact. Civilian impact, let me tell you some of the civilian impact. The RSF intensified its offensive in Kordofan, including a drone strike on Kalogi, killing dozens of civilians including children. The strike involved 3 attacks, kindergarten, hospital and third strike on rescuers. So, this is the height of loss of humanity on their part. They haven't actually spared even kindergarten, nor a hospital, nor any rescuers in this regard. So, this is very tragic. Even in conflict sort of situations, children should not be targeted deliberately. The RSF is consolidating control in Western Sudan and pushing into the oil-rich Kordofan region, while SAF focuses on key routes linking Central Sudan to the west. So, to certain extent, RSF offensive is on the rise, and they are engaging in such blatant sort of humanitarian crisis. So, fall of Al-Fashir and Darfur conflict. Al-Fashir, North Darfur's capital and the last SAF stronghold, fell after an 18-month siege. So, fall of Al-Fashir in recent times, we have seen the update in this regard. During the siege, the RSF encircled the city, cutting the civilian movement using sand berms. ACLAD data from April 23 to October 25, nearly 400 incidents of violence targeting civilians in Al-Fashir and surrounding areas, over 1400 deaths. So, in this particular incident only, we have 1400 deaths being reported. So, humanitarian total deaths, you can clearly see over 50,000 people have died in Sudanese civil war. Displacement, at least 9.8 million people forced to flee as of September 2025, the largest and fastest growing displacement crisis globally. So, this is the humanitarian crisis of epic proportion, and we need to take a look at solving this particular crisis on priority. Impact on food security, particularly Kordofan, which is Kadugli in South Kordofan. Sorghum prices have been stable for decades, but they have surged in recent times by 10 times. So, Al Fasher, North Darfur, 3.5 kg of millet exceeded $500. How they are going to afford this sort of prices in already impoverished countries beyond me. So, to certain extent food security has become a problem. You can clearly see Sudan has entered famine like condition, and there is means now for the UN to decide whether there is a famine or not, you should look at the Sudanese condition and declare a famine itself. From the perspective of mapping, this particular map of Sudan is important. You may be directly asked what are the border countries of Sudan. So, these are the 7 border countries of Sudan. Remember, very important: Egypt to the north, Libya to the northwest, Chad to the west, Central African Republic to the southwest, South Sudan to the south, Ethiopia, Eritrea to the east, Ethiopia and Eritrea to the east, and we have the Red Sea. So, it is a Red Sea country with a coastline on the Red Sea. Egypt, Libya to the north, Chad to the east, to the west, sorry. So, to certain extent, see, Kenya is not nor border, nor Uganda, nor DRC border South Sudan, remember that. So, very important from the perspective of mapping. You will definitely, you may get there is a high possibility of you may getting this sort of question in prelims. So, just from the perspective of mapping, this is very important. Another important article that we are going to take a look at is satellite science and spectrum fight. So, in recent times we have all seen the developments regarding space, SpaceX, particularly Starlink and Elon Musk, and how he is entering into our market for internet satellites or satellite internets. So, what has happened is there is a global race for what? To secure the spectrum. है ना? So, it is not enough to establish the satellites, but you should have the premium spectrums as well, so that you can actually send your airwaves or your internet satellite through these spectrums, through these preferred spectrums. So, it is not just satellites that are needed for the satellite internet, but we need preferred spectrum also. Spectrum is essentially a band of radio waves particularly. So, in physics, spectrum refers to energy levels. Particularly, satellite communications uses a word with a similar meaning. The spectrum is the range of radio frequencies available for wireless data transmission. Radio frequencies are to outer space activities as oxygen is to life on earth. So, essentially, without radio frequencies you cannot communicate, that is the case. Okay, that is the basic here. Enabling data transmission between satellites and ground stations through electromagnetic spectrum bands allocated by the International Telecommunication Union. So, ITU is something very important from the perspective of prelims as well. So, we are going to take a look at what exactly is ITU as well, but before that, what is happening is there are mega constellations. Obviously, you must be knowing what exactly is mega constellation. Mega constellation is essentially a group of satellites, that is what constellation, mega constellation. So, how many satellites you have in Starlink? The numbers are huge actually. Mega constellations beyond commercial purposes, mega constellations are strategic tools for countries especially outside the West to achieve technological sovereignty in space communication. Space communication will involve lot of things. See, earlier we have quantum communication developments as well, particularly quantum key distribution. So, development in that regard are also very vital from the perspective of science and technology, but space communication, which is dominating now, internet satellite internet is something is in news all the time, but earlier also we have communication satellites being launched. For them we have these specific radio frequencies and bands which are preferred bands. So, see, the most coveted sought after frequencies are Ku band, particularly 12 to 18 gigahertz and Ka band for high speed satellite internet, and L band for GPS. So, these bands, and all the companies want some spectrums in these bands, okay, and that is where ITU comes into picture. ITU tries to actually give the licenses to operate in these bands. So, essentially satellite mega constellations race which is ongoing right now, the global scramble to spectrum and orbiter slots has led to rapid satellite deployment. Major players, who are these major players in this? SpaceX Starlink, OneWeb is there, Amazon project, China's Guang is also there. So, you can clearly see particularly SpaceX with 8,000 plus satellites, you can clearly say how many satellites are there of SpaceX, and they are launching the satellites again and again to increase the and expand the reach overall. So, market growth is tremendous. That is why the first trillionaire that is going to be Elon Musk is investing heavily in the internet satellite space. The satellite mega constellation market is projected to grow from 4.87 billion in 24 to 27.31 billion by 2032, almost 26% annual growth rate. So, rising demand for high speed internet is in remote region is the reason for that. Let us look at ITU now, so that we can actually take a look at very important United Nations agency. It is specialized UN agency with 194 member states. It serves as a sole global coordinator for satellite spectrum and orbital slots, treating these as limited natural resources to be used rationally, efficiently and economically. See how it allocates spectrum is through first come first serve basis. The ITU requires satellite operators to file frequency applications early and cooperated with affected administrations before gaining international recognition. This system advantages well capitalized spacefaring nations that can navigate complex legal and technical processes. Late entrants risk losing access. So, essentially ITU it is the first come first serve basis. So, FCFS, remember that it is not like there is any sort of a preference to some countries or P5 countries or something. It is not like that. So, first come first serve. World Communication Conference 2023 reforms, you can little bit look at this as well. Resolution 8 was there. What exactly is Resolution 8 in this regard? Operators must notify deviations between planned and actual orbital deployment to prevent misuse of slots. So, challenges for ITU in the mega constellation era. The ITU framework, particularly the ITU framework was originally designed for the 1960s and 1990s satellite era, but the current challenges include managing thousands of satellite deployments annually compared to hundreds in the past. So, the number of satellites has also increased. So, ITU structure is 1960s and 70s type. It will not be able to actually cope up with the current demand. Operational plan 25 to 29, the prioritizes spectrum and satellite orbits. Approximately 80% of the ITU satellite related agenda items now involve mega constellations, highlighting their dominance in the international spectrum management. So, to certain extent we are going to see lot of times the haggling for getting the preferred coveted Ku and Ka band of spectrums, and it will create a digital divide. Essentially it will create a digital divide, and that is the foremost sort of concern here, that there will be digital feudalism going forward because of say disproportionate or some players actually means cornering the huge benefits. So, you can clearly see the issue of digital divide coming up here. Affordability challenges, particularly if you have look at the recent Starlink internet related prices, 8,000 per month, those sort of chances, those sort of charges they are actually having for Indian satellite internet market, 8,000 per month. So, are you able to pay 8,000 for the internet connectivity? So, some people will obviously pay. See, most of the time satellite internet is very important to connect regional not well connected regions of means any country or India. India's role and some initiatives you can clearly see. Bharti Enterprises, particularly OneWeb is there, which has the stake in that. TRAI is the regulatory authority. Essentially it is the administrative authority which spectrum allocation में वो involved है, rather than auctions for non-geostationary satellites allowing shared spectrum use while accelerating. So, TRAI is allowing shared spectrum use as well. So, very important way forward you can clearly see particularly ITU R74 resolution and space debris management. Space debris is something very important issue here that needs to be managed effectively as well. So, governance challenges you can clearly look at as well. So, implications for emerging space nations is something very important. So, digital divide is something is the casualty in this So, ITU from the perspective of prelims, remember ITU, remember mega constellations, Starlink internet, and to certain extent how ITU allocates spectrum and what is the situation vis-a-vis India for spectrum allocation. So, particularly there was another news, although I do not know how the particular team missed making the PPT on that particular article. So, the article is about marine protected areas, MPAs. So, as I earlier said, the MPA, what has government said is to open up the offshore blocks for MPAs, marine protected areas. So, the issue here is the government opened up marine protected areas also for the offshore blocks, particularly for mining purposes, obviously for polymetallic nodules and other purposes, for other energy projects also. And there was fierce backlash in Kerala particularly. What the government has now said is they will not touch the marine protected areas. Almost 160 marine protected areas have been declared in recent times, and more than 300 sites in other marine areas that are under conservation as well under 2024 rules. So, they also will not be touched now. So, to certain extent there is a clarification on the government side. So, you must know some of the important marine protected area sites. That is the only important part in that particular article from the perspective of prelims. So, know some of the important marine protected areas, like for example, for that matter, Gulf of Mannar is one important marine protected area. Bhitarkanika National Park is also declared as important marine protected area to certain extent. So, these are also important, and marine protected areas are also there at a global level. So, that particular article is also very vital for you. Okay. So, just know some of the most vital and biggest marine protected areas, hai na? So, that is also very important to know. So, due to be missing the PPT in this regard, it is not included in the PPT section, but as I said, this particular article is important, although from the perspective of prelims we discuss some important parts. Okay, just prepare those important parts. Okay, that is it from my side, and stay tuned for another edition of Daily News Analysis. Thank you.